So that's my underlying point, is that some of the panic around this, which is hyped up, right, by the companies that have grown out of that panic, AI detectors and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, hang on, just what are you actually worried about here? What are we worried about? We're worried about students not actually learning, not actually changing their minds, changing their brains and growing. And that's an issue. But we've been worried about that for ages in a bunch of different ways, right?
And that's what I think we've got to see AI as. It's a tool to help us, not a thing that is going to take over our brain, our classroom, our life, our world, our everything. Welcome to Rainbow Skies for Teachers, the go-to show dedicated to teachers who want to make a big difference in education. Whether you're in your first few years or well into your teaching career, we are here to inspire, support, and empower you with bite-sized tips, simple strategies, and the motivation to lead an education revolution, one classroom at a time.
We're Ashley and Alicia from Rainbow Sky Creations, two Aussie teachers who love all things teaching and learning. We are here to help you thrive as you work toward making an impact in your students' lives while loving your life as a teacher.
We are here to help you bring joy, simplicity, and creativity into your classroom on the daily, because
there are rainbows ahead, my friend, and together we're unstoppable.
Let's get into today's episode.
Rainbow Sky Creations acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Dharawal and Whadjuk Noongar people. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
Hello. Welcome back to Rainbow Skies for Teachers. I am Ash and I am one half of Rainbow Sky Creations. Today, I'm going to be sitting in with not Alicia, but a guest. His name is Matt and he's here to talk all about the integration of AI in education. Now, I know this topic can be a daunting one. It's one that has got many, many positives and many, many negatives. And no matter where you sit on that spectrum, today's conversation is going to be a really great one to listen to. As we were finishing recording, Matt and I were having a little bit of a chat about AI, and he said, we need to keep the students in the forefront when it comes to AI and this discussion around AI, especially with the negative impacts and some of the uses that we are hearing about that might not sit so well with us as teachers. And I really loved that. I loved the idea of just sitting back and thinking about our students as the number one priority when it comes to AI, using it in the classroom and using it as teachers. Now, you've heard Alicia and I speak many, many times about how we think AI is a great way to save teachers time. We touch on that in this episode. We talk about different ways that teachers can use AI, but we also talk about many ways that teachers can use AI to help with teaching and learning for the students. And Matt brings a really fantastic perspective. It's not all sunshines and rainbows. We do touch on some of those questionable things or the worries that teachers might have. So we really try to dive deep into AI and look at it from lots of different perspectives. I hope you really enjoy this chat with Matt Esterman. Okay, Matt, let's dive straight in. What are some low-risk, high-impact ways classroom teachers can start experimenting with AI?
Some low-hanging fruit would probably be things like taking lesson planning, things that you'd normally do, a course that's coming up or a lesson that's coming up, a unit of work that's coming up, whether you've done it before 100 times or whether it's fresh, and going to one of the platforms that you have access to and just going in and saying, I'm about to teach this. Here's a few factors. It might be a particular classroom environment that you're in charge of, or it might be certain learners that you're thinking about, putting in a bit of that sort of context, and then saying, this is how long the lessons are, blah, 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 whatever sort of context you might want to put in and see what it gives you, but not stopping there. So the best thing about this sort of low-hanging fruit, quiet exploration is that you can use these platforms and no one's going to have a go at you for asking more questions and for putting more comments in or saying, no, that's not quite right. Or if you make a mistake, right, because you think, oh, actually, no, it's not stage 4, it's stage 5, or in New South Wales language, or it's not year 6, it's year 7, or something like that, right? Where you just make a bit of a mistake. No one cares. So just go in and change it, and the AI will just go, yep, sure, no worries, whip it together in a different form. So I think if you just start with that, something as simple as, I'm about to teach this, here's some context, see what you get. That'll give you an indication of whether that model works for you. And by model, I mean which platform essentially works for you. And you can try that with assessment tasks, saying, This is the task we've done for the last 3 years. You can literally upload that task if you've got the permission to do so up into some of these models. And you can say, I really just want to try something different. Can you give me 3 different options on how we could change this? Or I have learners who have this particular difficulty or this particular need. Can you just reshape this or give me some options on how I might redesign this assessment task? You might put in there, hey, I'm worried about the impact of AI on this assessment task. What are some ways that are super ironically and getting a bit meta, right? Using AI to battle AI. But you might say, yeah, look, I'm really worried about it's a take-home essay. What are some ways that we could actually make sure the students can show their learning, show evidence of learning and growth, even though we know they have access to AI? And the AI, of course, will come back to you and say, here are some options. You might get them to interview somebody. You might get them to do blah, 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 blah. And you know what? It might give you 10 ideas and 9 of them are terrible, but I guarantee one of them will make you just stop and say, oh, hang on. I never would have thought of that myself. Like in a million
Yes.
years, sitting there at your desk or wherever you happen to, on the lounge, coming up with these ideas or something, you just never would have thought of that. So it's not really about efficiency per se. And I think a lot of people get locked up in the efficiency conversation of saying, I have to be more productive around this. And like, yeah, but that's not just what teaching's about. Like teaching's about expanding options for students. Sure, it's about accelerating them through curriculum and things like that and getting them to where they need to go as quickly as possible. But there are moments where you do want to slow down and you do want to think and you do want to sit in things and think through things more slowly. And AI, by doing some of that productivity stuff, can allow you to think really differently about things too.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a massive fan of using AI, and I know that people are sitting on the fence about it, especially teachers. And we're primarily talking to primary school teachers here. So I think they don't have the problem of kids using it as much in order to do their work. But you said something really interesting at the EduTech conference that I saw you at a couple of weeks ago. I watched you speak, and it was brilliant, by the way.
Oh, so kind.
But you mentioned, had a good laugh at this. I was sitting next to my dad. We went to the conference together, and you said, we've never had a policy for parents doing projects and handing in projects, like cheating in inverted commas that way.
Yeah.
So like, how is AI much different from that? Can you speak on that for a minute?
Yeah, sure. And I guess it is in that moment because I know I can already hear people saying, yeah, but it's parents just trying to help out and that sort of thing. And absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, I do it as well. I've got 2 kids. You try and help out, especially as they get up into secondary. My mum's a history teacher, by the way. I became a history teacher. So especially on those subjects where you feel most familiar, of course you want to sort of, if you're a lawyer and your kid's doing legal studies or something, of course you're going to try and inject yourself into that. And I think one of the, maybe I didn't use this particular example, but we've all had to build a volcano or something at some point. And the teacher knows, and the kids are asleep because you're doing it while they've already gone to bed.
Yeah.
And everybody in that ecosystem knows that it's not all the students' work. There have been other influences on that piece of work, and everyone's okay with it. And like you say, we haven't built policies around parents, these protocols around what parents are and aren't allowed to do in that case, because we know that the student has to be able to talk through the process or talk through the knowledge that they've acquired or something like that to prove their learning. So I guess it's just to lower the temperature on that particular front a little bit to say,
Yes.
in some cases, I've gone into schools and said, actually, looking at your assessment policy, looking at some of these other policies, you might not even need an AI policy for that real anguish that we still have and that we're working through around how we teach, learn, and assess and report on learning in the AI world. And because, it's probably covered somewhere. If people are worried about cheating, that's in your assessment policy. If people are worried about using the wrong platforms and sharing information, that's probably in your IT policy and acceptable use policy. A lot of these things, I should say, are covered by policies and procedures that probably exist already. So that's my underlying point, is that some of the panic around this, which is hyped up, right, by the companies and by companies that have grown out of that panic, AI detectors and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, hang on, just what are you actually worried about here? What are we worried about? We're worried about students not actually learning, not actually changing their minds, changing their brains and growing. And that's an issue. But we've been worried about that for ages in a bunch of different ways, right? So it's just about taking a reality check and saying, okay, where can we lower the temperature on this conversation? And I see people, when I run workshops and I mention that, I see people visibly relax in the audience because whether they're a director of teaching and learning role, where they're responsible for that area, whether they're a deputy, whether they're a classroom teacher, they just go, oh, yeah, okay, we can manage that. It's not yet another workflow we've got to add on to the already overflowing responsibility of school. And that's really cool.
Okay, so one of the other worries or concerns that we particularly are hearing from teachers online is the environmental impact.
Yeah, yep.
It is a big one, and I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable with
No,
this
let's do
line
it.
of conversation. But where do you sit in the idea that using AI is bad for the environment?
Yeah, I'm absolutely torn on it because we know that the water consumption, for example, of doing a fairly basic request from an AI is volumes greater than, say, a Google search. But what I think we have to be realistic about, and I don't want to sound too optimistic or Pollyanna or ignorant as well, even though I absolutely am, when we're using these tools, hopefully we are using it for more interesting and compelling and useful and valuable things than a basic Google search. So if you're just
Mm.
comparing those two use cases of I've entered something and got something out of Google Gemini versus I've done a Google search, that basic comparison is really quite stark. It's damaging. There is an absolute environmental cost to both of those things, and it is more dramatic on the AI side. However, what I'm doing with that prompt in AI should be 10 times better than what I get from a Google search. And that's why we're finding that there's a migration happening away from Google searching because everyone's sick of all the ads and the fact that you only get 5 actual links that are possibly useful there. They'd rather
Mm.
go into something like Perplexity and ask that request because you get not only a response, but you get the sources of where it comes from. So that's a little tip for people who are listening. Try Perplexity if you're worried about the sources of information that you're getting. And so I guess that's part of the conversation. I'm not going to say it's a silver bullet because there are none, but that's part of it. And then I go to, okay, we make those ethical decisions all the time around the clothes we buy, around whether we drive or take public transport. There are so many
Mhm.
aspects of life, and people would be absolutely exhausted thinking through each and every single moment of where you're using the technology we're using right now. I genuinely don't know. And I'm not being facetious. I'm just saying I genuinely don't know what the environmental cost of us doing this conversation is. And there is one. It's probably multi-layered and it is having a definite impact on other people and the environment around the world. But I don't know what that is. And so I guess it is an uncomfortable position to be in, right? Because you're saying we knowingly are using tools that are destructive. And I went to a conference called the Reimagine Ed conference, which I highly recommend everyone at least have a look at and educators absolutely try and get to. Because one of the key points from one of their sustainability experts was sustainability is not sustainable. It's actually on a curve. If we just do sustainability as we're doing it right now, we're actually still destroying the earth. What we need to do is regenerative practices around we actually have to plant more trees than we're losing. You can't just plant the same amount because actually we're using more energy we're consuming more because there are more people and we're generally speaking we're consuming more, and so it's actually on a bad trend. So we have to do better than just sustainable. So like net zero, they're just like, no, it's got to be positive. Like net positive is what we're aiming for so that we have a chance to build a better world. And I guess that's the perspective I suppose I come at with AI is it's okay, this is why I'm training so many teachers to use it well or better, hopefully, and students as well, because most of us, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, said this in a podcast just 2 days ago, was most people are using it like a very basic Google search. They've got the data. They're the platform, right? That
Yeah.
is the platform at the moment. And they can see everything we're doing. And they're looking at all of that saying 90% of what you guys are doing is, I need a recipe for this. So, yes, there's a massive environmental cost, but actually, we're in that revolution of what this looks like. It is not, of course, exactly the same, but analogous to trains coming in during the Industrial Revolution and steam machines and that sort of the environmental cost of those things was massive and still is. But you can see those other values being put there. And what I hope is that these companies are not just building more data centers and chewing up more water and more energy, but at the same time, they're trying to find completely new ways to design energy systems with AI. With the very stuff they're building and fueling, we can actually build better solutions. So it's more complex than, and thanks for engaging in this conversation, by the way, as well, because I think a lot of the time, especially on social media, like LinkedIn and things like that, it's like this paper versus this paper, this position in 50 words versus this position or something like that.
Mm.
And it's a conversation you've got to have to say, use AI better than Google searching. Otherwise, yeah, maybe you shouldn't use AI. Just pick up the pencil and the paper and do some stuff with your own brain.
Yeah, I think we make those sorts of environmental decisions all the time in our day-to-day life, like AI side. So why not put that lens on AI? Because it's here, people are using it. And I stand with you. There's lots of things that we do in our day-to-day life that impact the environment. But I can see the huge positives with AI. So using it responsibly, using it to that next level, which hopefully we'll get into a bit more of a discussion about that, is probably a really good place to start.
Yeah, and also I think too from an individual, it's kind of like talking about climate change, right? If you go up to someone in the street and say, hey, you need to do better on climate change. And here's what you need to do. You need to plant more trees. You need to do all this sort of stuff. I'm not sure that's particularly helpful on an individual level versus something like, hey, just do some more recycling. Here's some information on how to do recycling better. Because that's something I
Mm.
can control. That's in my scope. That's in my sphere of influence, as I might call it. And same thing with schools. There's certain things we can control. So yeah, actually, if we're talking about it ethically, are we doing a bit of a review of the AI tools that are out there that our staff and students and everybody are using? And are we picking the best option for us, considering all the things we need to consider, rather than just saying, no, don't use it, which is I think, flawed position anyway. As you say, it's all here and so easily connected. So I think that's something for people to consider as well. It's like, what's in your individual scope? So don't like, it might be fun to do a few times, but don't just, go on and say, oh, what's another recipe for Thai green curry? Because you can do easy Google searching on that. You've probably got cookbooks that you got for Christmas the last few Christmases that are sitting in the bookshelf, and you can use those, right? So that's that moment where, as an individual, you can make a difference, organizations can make a difference. And I hope that governments come along and do say, hey, kind of like when you do some forms of travel, we're actually going to either make or influence or incentivize companies to say, hey, do you want to offer a carbon offset or some
Mm.
sort of offset or whatever, right? So that when you go in to one of these programs, and especially the power users of these things who are using it every day for multiple different things, for, I guess, me, where I'm using it for marketing materials and I'm using it to write proposals with me and I'm doing all sorts of different things with it. I maybe get flagged, hey, Matt, do you want to pay, say, $5? Because this project's going to take this amount of water and you can offset that by paying this because we've partnered with this water production company or something like that. And it's something I can actually do, though. It's something in my control and I can click yes or no. And to me, that is a better ethical decision than, which I do as well, is pick up a book on the environmental costs of it and then put the book down and think, whew,
Yeah.
and there's actually no real impact of that. So I think that's what my pitch would be, is to say, as an individual, there are certain things you can do, make better choices. As organizations, we can do better things. But then there's government, and we have to lobby and encourage governments and other big organizations to do that sort of stuff too.
Yeah, all really good suggestions. So let's switch gears. And you've mentioned a few times different tools teachers can use, AI tools. Can you mention, just like list a few for us that would be helpful for teachers? Say there's a teacher listening to this, they know of nothing, or maybe they might only know of ChatGPT.
Yep, cool. So some of the top ones that I recommend, I already mentioned Perplexity, which
Yep.
is like ChatGPT with references. So I highly recommend going into that and using similar prompting. And by prompts, for people who haven't engaged yet, prompts are just the text you put into these particular websites and start the conversation. That's what we mean by prompts. And output is what we mean by what you get back, whether it's text or whether it's an image or whether it's video. Those are all outputs. So go into something like Perplexity and give it a whirl, especially if you're trying to talk through a research task with students or something like that. That's a better place to start rather than any of the big platforms. There's Diffit, which is a differentiation tool, which, again, you can go in, you can select from different options. So you might select a year group, a subject area, or you might just type something into its little input area, and you will get back a series of suggestions around a bit of information, some short answer questions, multiple choice questions, that sort of thing. But then you can switch the age range or the ability level or the context quite easily. Go, okay, well, that's for a year 7 reading area, but I've got a student who's reading at a year 9 or 10 level. So you can just flick that switch, you can change that option, and then it will redraft all of the information that it's presenting to you as that new reading level. So you don't have to do that as a teacher. So that's actually a lifesaver for a lot of teachers, where you've got 30 students in front of you or with you, and you're trying to address the needs of all those students, but they have to all learn about gravity. And so
Yeah.
traditionally what you do is you'd say, okay, so what I might have the time and the ability to do is find a resource for this cluster of students, then a different resource for this cluster of students, different resource for this cluster of students. Diffit helps you do that. But it's all the same concept. It's all the same information and presented in a really neat and tidy way. And then it also has options for building automatic templates for different thinking strategies and things like that. Diffit's a really good one. Brisk teaching, I've seen people use really quite deeply and effectively. So Brisk, you can just Google Brisk teaching and it will, basically it helps you mark and helps you give feedback on student work. And this is the point where I probably put a little caveat in there, which is please don't share any personal information about yourself, about students, any sort of identifiable information. You don't need to. These systems don't care who you are. There's absolutely no reason to put this is Matt's essay, or have my name on the top of a file. It doesn't care. It'll just read the information it's given and give you the feedback that way.
Question on that. So are
Yeah,
you taking a photo, say we're talking grade 2, are you taking a photo of their assessment and uploading it?
you can. And you can, in fact, do that with any of the big platforms as well. So there is image uploads, or are is bad grammar. Either way, yeah, you can upload images, and you can absolutely do it of student work. Most of the leading platforms, I'd hesitate to say all, but I'm pretty sure it's all of these leading platforms that allow you to upload images, can read handwriting now, even pretty terrible handwriting. And of course, you have to test it out and say, hey, can you type out what you can see? And then the AI will type it out for you. But yeah, that'll work in ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Microsoft Copilot, or any of them really, to be able to upload student work and get some instant feedback on it. The best thing to do, though, from a teacher's point of view, is to make sure that the AI actually knows what you're marking and how you want it marked. So what you need to do is put up the assignment, put up the student work, and put up a sample, or at least the marking criteria, so that you're educating the tool into what you want, what your standard is. It's basically like getting trained to be a HSE marker in New South Wales talk, right? Where you're actually told, no, just shake off your school-based expectations and thinking, because actually we all have to mark to the same standard. That teaching process of the markers is pretty much the same what you have to do with AI tools. So you've got to put in the information you want it to mark according to, and usually it will adhere to that. Of course, there might be what they call hallucinations. It basically lies or makes stuff up, and you've still got to check it all. But again, it's not necessarily, like I said earlier, the productivity thing. Like, it may help you speed up the process of getting through some draft feedback that you can then edit, but it really is more about, does it give insights as if it was a second marker? Are students getting richer feedback because you're putting it through AI? Because you might save some time on the whole process, but also because you have more time to put more insights in there. So I think that's the thing for people to remember, is regardless of what platform you might use for that sort of AI assisted marking, is why you're doing it. Is it just to get through the pile of marking faster? Or is it actually to give different insights, to be consistent about your marking too, or some other goal that you're trying to achieve with it? And there are some platforms that do currently support AI marking, Brisk and others, but always check and always make sure that you're willing to stand by whatever information is put in front of students, parents, colleagues, whatever. So long as you're willing to stand by it and say, yep, I'm okay with all of this, even if it's terrible, like even if it's not great work, so long as you're comfortable with saying, yep, I endorse this, even if it's not all my own work, that's actually what we're expecting of students now too, is we're expecting them to get these literacies and capabilities right with AI, whatever AI looks like at any given time, by the way. But what we still want to see is them stand up, not literally, but stand up and say, yes, I'm comfortable that this is a representation of my learning.
Yeah, you combated my but that I was going to give you with teachers that are driving along listening to this saying, but like, why does AI need to be doing our marking? It doesn't need to be doing your marking at all, especially where primary school teachers is a very different landscape than marking big essays and things like that. But using it as a tool, and that's what I think we've got to see AI as. It's a tool to help us, not a thing that is going to take over our brain, our classroom, our life, our world, our everything.
What I think it does is it gives you more choices than what we've had before. So, for example, right now, if you just want to do a check for knowledge, right, you could do an automated marking, Google form, Microsoft form, whatever, simple quiz, right? In any of those platforms, we've been able to do it for 10 years. You can have it automatic marking. The results go back to the students. You can even put in the correct answer so the students can see the correct answer. But there are some people who come back and say, but Matt, and I've had this with colleagues myself, and I've said this too, is the point of that task isn't just to see the student's knowledge, it's actually to see, for example, their handwriting, or it's the speed at which they get through that, which you can also test through the screen, of course, but it's different when it's in a live environment. You might want to see when and how they struggle through and grapple with those ideas, right? And that's not what you get through an automated process. But what I'm saying is we've got to take that step back, and I'm sounding really consultancy now, right? If I say, let's just zoom out. But if we do that, then you say, but that step or that series of steps is just one little mini workflow in a highly complex environment. And the teacher is tracking all of that stuff. So do I want kids on screens just using AI to both generate stuff, send it to the teacher who then marks it with AI, who then sends it back with feedback
Yes.
generated by AI, right? I don't think anyone wants that. However, there may be instances of that, right? And we've got to get used to this idea that in the very, very near future, in primary, in the early years, there will be instances where students will get AI feedback. And how do they deal with that? The number of times that I give feedback to students and it's pretty much ignored based on what they submit for the next task.
Yeah.
That's not the issue. But I think we've just, again, got to be realistic about it and be really transparent with the students too. And just say, hey, guess what? For this task, we're going to try and battle the AI. We're going to try and really see how you can drive this stuff to get a much, much better response. And we're going to see what the AI says in response to that work. And the teacher becomes like that guide on the side or that ally in learning. And you can use the AI as a bit of a foil, a bit of a like faux enemy kind of a thing. But guess what? That's the world they're going to be graduating into in just a couple of years. They will be going into work environments right now that expect you to be able to grapple with these different entities in the workplace, let alone the fact that we're already seeing graduation employment rates of graduates in the US slipping. So unemployment is rising, to put it a different way, for graduates coming out of university because these big companies, small companies, whoever are just saying, oh, actually, we don't need 90 graduates this year in our massive law firm. We only need 10 to actually get all that legwork done now. 10 graduates who know how to leverage these tools can easily do the work of 90. So from a business point of view, they're starting saying, oh, we can't really justify hiring 90 anymore. We still want graduates. We still want fresh blood, fresh perspectives, but it's starting already. And so if that flows back into school, that kind of promise of, yeah, hey, go to school for about 13 years, hop into a degree or a TAFE qualification or get into the workplace, and then you're on the conveyor belt through life, it is just not true anymore. If we're not at least exposing students to this at school, helping them grapple with that, and making a whole bunch of mistakes along the way, by the way, then we're actually doing them a disservice.
Yeah. Something I do with my own children at home, I've got one in grade 4, 2, and kindergarten. I don't do this with the kindergarten one because she doesn't read yet. But my older kids love using AI. And I try and encourage them. They say, Mum, can we use AI for this? I rarely say no. I usually say yes. What are we going to put in to AI? What's the prompt? You come up with the prompt. So I'm getting them thinking to begin with. But then when it spits out its amazing answer, we look at that and I get them to go through and critically look at it. So we talk about words that they wouldn't use or words that they don't understand, things that they like, things that they don't like. So often my son hates writing speeches. He hates it. His speech this year is going to be why kids shouldn't have to do speeches at school.
Awesome.
Amazing. So we're going to get AI to help us write it. But then he is going to go through and cut and edit and make it his own. And I think that's a really good starting point because it's probably no different going all the way back to our beginning of our conversation. It's probably no different from him and I sitting at the kitchen bench, him going, I don't want to write this speech. And me going, okay, let's start with I strongly believe. And off we go. So
Yeah.
that's one way I combat it. And I know it's a lot easier when you're one-on-one at home, but there's different ways that we can use it and teaching our kids how to use it instead of it's the enemy or
Yep.
instead of what you get is what you get and you just use it straight away. We've got to use our brains, so add the brain power to the AI.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other point I'll make there as well is, your kids are so lucky to have you driving that conversation at home and reminding them and knowing when to take a step back and letting them go and fail and all that sort of stuff as well, of course. But there's a whole bunch of young people out there who don't have regular access to that support. Like it does go back to that early part of the conversation around parental involvement, right? And it's parents are usually pretty good at judging when they are going to help, when they are going to count through the numbers with the student, or they're going to not, or their child, or they're not, because they know they want their children to do it themselves. Just teachers in a different way know when to be really present and involved or when to take a step back. But I guess there is that factor of a whole bunch of students don't have those sorts of supports, right? And certainly not in a regular way, whether it's parents who do shift work or any of the many other factors of life at the moment. And so I guess one of the reasons I'm so interested in this space is, can AI provide some kind of an artificial support in that sense? So there's a guy, Ethan Mollick, who's quite prolific and he's been driving the AI in education conversation for quite a while now. He's based at the University of Pennsylvania, and he talks about the AI being the best available human equivalent So it's not human. No one's pretending that it is. But he's just saying, yeah, so if you don't have access to a tutor, for example, you can now build yourself these artificial tutors. And so long as you do have that guidance and you do have that support from usually an actual human, whether it's a parent or a teacher, to know when that is appropriate or not, you can now have access to that resource that just wasn't possible before. So that's what I'm interested in, is saying, where are those gaps? The analogy I usually use is my grandfather's turning 100 in a few weeks' time, and he's in an aged care facility, and he's got his wife there, my step grandmother. He's got regular visitors from my mum and aunts and uncles and us and that sort of stuff, right? But there are people that 9 out of 10 of the people in that lovely aged care home get no visitors. None at all. So for them, like when I hear stories of some aged care organizations deploying little robots, right? Whether they're designed like fluffy seals or they're friendly little robots that wheel around and you can talk to them like an Alexa or a Siri and they say, oh, I've got a joke for you or something like that. You're talking with people who have nothing else except the staff. So it's a false equivalence to say, oh, yeah, but they should be really talking to a human. It's great. Are you going to go and visit? And
Yeah.
are you going to go have a cup of tea? So I think it's the same for a lot of students as well, is that when it is, I'm not saying this is necessarily good or bad. I think it's okay. You are, say, a HSC student, it's 10 o'clock at night. You're not getting to talk to your teacher till 8 o'clock tomorrow, but you just want a quick bit of feedback on something. Now, if you have been supported through your school, your parents are a bit aware and literate around AI as well, so this is artificial, you're talking to a machine, then you can get some sort of answers that may just propel you through to the next day. If you're a much younger student and you're trying to come up with some creative ideas because you've got to write a story about dragons for tomorrow. Like today, I was really annoying the students in my son's class because they had a showcase of learning and they were doing these wonderful things on the Great Barrier Reef. And I said, oh, I don't think it's really a great barrier reef unless there's dragons involved. And they were just like, oh, Matt, you can't. No, that's not the point. So I was just being a larrikin. But the point is, if that was a creative piece, they could just go, oh my God, he wants to talk about dragons. And maybe AI is that support, that artificial support. And in that moment, for something that's pretty low stakes, right? To just go, oh, how can I possibly integrate? But you don't have to start with a blank page. So
Yeah.
students don't have to have that fear factor of staring at a blank page or a blank screen. They can get some ideas, which that experience may be appropriate some of the time, but it may not be appropriate some of the time too. And so that's the conversation, is when should AI be used? It's not, can it be used? Because of course it can for all sorts of things. It's like, when should it be used? And that comes from building students' AI literacy, building their capabilities so that they're confident enough to be able to go into that environment and make a great choice.
For sure. And same for you as a teacher, instead of looking at a task and staring at a blank screen, like often in primary schools, we're hearing a lot at the moment about getting kids to read and encouraging them to read texts about topics that they really enjoy. But Joe Bloggs might enjoy dinosaurs and another kid loves fairies. Everyone's got a different viewpoint. And instead of the teacher going and searching, and it could take hours to find text at the right level for all of those kids, AI could be a tool that could help you find the text. Like, it doesn't even necessarily need to write it. It might be able to just point you in the right direction.
Absolutely. And I think one fun thing for parents to do is, and they can do it secretly too, okay? We'll talk in hushed tones if you like, but they could use ChatGPT or one of the other services where you can actually press a button and you can talk to it. Have you ever done that with your
Yes,
voice?
I have, yeah.
Have you tried the camera option there? Have you pressed that camera button?
No, I have not.
Okay, so I wish we were recording this visually, right? Maybe we'll have to do a couple of screenshots or something for your listeners. But what you can do is, when you open up that view that allows you to talk with the AI, so like a Siri or an Alexa or something like that, right? But you're in ChatGPT, there should be a camera button there too. And if you hit that camera button, it will open up your camera and it will be able to see whatever you see. And you can say things like, hey, look at this bookcase. Let me see if we can, tell me if you can hear this, because let's do a live, I've never done a live demo on a podcast. This is really
first
cool.
For everything.
That's it. So people should be able to hear it. So can you at least see, just confirm, you see that little white round button on the side?
I
Okay.
can see it.
So I'm going to press that little button next to the microphone and it'll bring up this one. Have you seen this screen before? The voice one?
Yep, the voice screen.
Great.
So we're in
Okay,
ChatGPT on his phone, everyone.
Thank you. Yes. And it is the paid version as well. So this might not appear in the free version. Who knows? It changes day to day. But see how there's a little camera button there?
Yes, on the left-hand side.
Do you want to describe what just happened?
So now we can see, can you move your camera? Oh, hang on.
So it looks like you just tapped.
Sorry, you talk,
Okay,
I'll mute it.
so I can see your background, which is a massive bookshelf with all these millions of books.
Lets you start sharing your video.
Cool. And so what I'll do now is I'm going to ask ChatGPT to describe what it can see. So I'll turn up the volume and I'll ask
Okay.
it what it can see. Okay, hey Chad, can you describe what you can see and where you think we are, please?
Sure. From what I can see, it looks like you're in a cozy room with a lot of bookshelves behind you. It's almost like a personal library or a study. It's definitely giving off some really nice book lover vibes.
Great. And what sort of things do you think I'm interested based on the texts you can see?
Well, I can see a variety of different book genres on those shelves. So it looks like you have a pretty diverse taste in reading. I can spot some fiction, maybe some nonfiction, and definitely a lot of colorful spines. So I'd say you're probably interested in a wide range of topics.
All right, we might leave it there.
That's
So,
pretty amazing because before we started our conversation, press record, we were talking about the books in the background. I'm going to take a picture of us and share it onto our website so people can actually see the background.
great.
But we were talking about the sorts of books, and you said that your wife's an English teacher. She's read pretty much every book on that bookshelf. And of course, English teachers will have read a wide range of texts.
Yep, absolutely. So had I gone closer to because to be fair to chat, right? I was pretty zoomed out, but it will read the spines on the books. So we did this experiment, a year ago now at my previous school, and we went to a particular shelf in the library. I was with the librarian at the time, and I just said, look, I'm researching this topic. What book do you think I should use? And it happened to be the ancient Egypt section, and the student was looking at Cleopatra. And so it said probably this one or this one, because that seems to be about ancient Egypt or Cleopatra. Now, remember, it's not just looking at what's there, it's applying that to its massive digital brain of all the books that it knows exists. And then, had I gone further, I could have said, oh, cool. So, what other books should I be looking for? Which ones are more appropriate to I'm in year 7 or I'm in year 12? It doesn't know who you are, right? It's following instructions, it's a machine. So, you can say all of that stuff and then get perhaps some guidance. And it was so lovely because the head of library is just such a interested and curious person. And I knew it would go one of two ways, right? Either she'd be totally freaked out, she'd never talk to me again, or she'd be delighted. And luckily she was delighted because her words were, oh, students could do this while I'm busy doing something else.
Yes.
Again, back to that best available human equivalent. Of course, it would be better to have a librarian or a teacher or an older student or something like that helping you find your resource. But what if they're not there? And yes, they could come back at lunchtime if they're sitting in a history class or something like that. But you know how life goes. Sometimes you don't get back to those things because you've got other things that you have to do. So I think that's one of the other really interesting areas to explore. So parents, you can do this at home. You can open up that same function and just have a look at something in your house. You can say, hey, where do you think I left my keys? What do you think I should do about the arrangement of furniture? What do you think about the lighting in this space? Now, again, it's not just to do trivial stuff like we talked about earlier, but it may be about something that you just need a different insight into that's actually going to improve your life, improve your learning, and give you access to different resources.
If you're listening to this with little ears around, just skip past the next 30 seconds because I'm going to talk about something that little ears don't need to listen to. A couple of months ago, it was Easter. My husband went out. He was having a great time. I was left at home with my 3 kids, trying to get them all to bed. I'm an early to bed person. I was really tired and I hadn't organized anything for the Easter egg hunt. So I went on to chat and I said, I want an Easter egg hunt inside my house because, spoiler alert, last year I left them outside and rats attacked the eggs. It was a bit of a disaster. Anyway, That's a side note. My kids are really good about it. So I wanted it inside the house. I got it to come up with clues and all the clues were rhyming. I printed off, cut it out, put them out. The kids followed this little hunt, which was amazing.
Cool.
But what would have been better is if I had have been able to show my house, the downstairs of my house with the video, and then it would have come up with even better things. I would have had to hardly edit it at all.
Absolutely. And that's it. It adds possible capabilities. It adds layers that you can choose to engage with, right? Because you can choose not to do that. And that's totally fine. Who's going to have a go at you, right? Another fun thing on that front is getting it to act like the Easter Bunny and give you advice around things. And I'd be fascinated to see how it would talk back to you. And that's another thing about the AI. It will take on personas for you. So you can say, hey, I want you to act like an expert in this. I want you to act like the Easter Bunny or something. I want you to act like a French person talking about this topic, maybe talking about World War II or something like that. I want to talk from a French perspective. So it will actually do that stuff, let alone talking in different accents and languages, which is really fascinating and hilarious a lot of the time too, by the way, because it might mistranslate. But it just opens up options, right? Getting back to the educational use of these things as well, there's several examples of schools connecting with families and parents in particular from language backgrounds other than English. And so now you can Yes, you've got your English version of the poster, but now you can either create or print or at least do a link to every single other language that the AI has a connection to. You can get it checked by people who know that language, and then you can have really personalized school resources for families as well, let alone setting up little bots, GPTs, or things like that for parents to interact with in their own language too. Like it's really those sorts of options and opportunities explode when you start to really investigate them.
Yeah, it's really encompassing that inclusivity, which is so important in school communities, and we're using AI for good. So, we've talked about teachers using it for differentiation. We've talked about them using it to help them with their assessment and their marking. We've talked about creative uses with students. But what about some different ways that they could just use it in their day to day role?
Yeah, for teachers, I think that is a distinction a lot of teams need to make. So teacher teams, whether you're in a stage with other people or a year group with other people or whatever the structure looks like at your school, and to differentiate between the classroom facing use of AI and the backwards facing use of AI, for want of a better term, right? Is
Yeah.
the admin stuff, the things the kids never see, but the things that you've got to work on all the time. So whether it's planning an excursion, you don't have to start with a blank page anymore. One example is a school I worked at yesterday, been to the Botanic Gardens the day before. You're like, great, okay, we're going to learn about these features of geography. We're planning to go to the Botanic Gardens. What other outcomes from the rest of the syllabuses for year 3 can be hit by going to the Botanic Gardens? And so then the AI just goes, well, you might think about these maths outcomes around size or around location or around angles or measurement or something like that, and English and blah, 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 blah. I think that's a really interesting use of it when you start not just to actually do the itinerary of the excursion, not actually just to do a draft of the risk management, not just to do a draft of the permission notes, not just to do a newsletter items and all that other stuff you can do, but then also start to think, how can we make this experience richer? How can we make this experience actually cover more of the content so we can grab back some time to do some even more interesting stuff? I think that's a really cool area to explore. And then if you apply that to basically any workflow a teacher or anybody might have around any kind of planning you do, any meeting you've got to get prepared for, any presentation you've got to do, an interview for a promotion, right? Where you just want to bounce some ideas around and everyone's really busy. Okay. People will give you some time, but you actually want a completely neutral point of view. Great. Act like an interviewer. Here's the job description. Ask me standard questions one at a time, and I'll give you a response, and I want your feedback on my responses. Things like that, where you can now use the AI to personify these kinds of different roles. Yeah, that's just a few things off the top of my head.
That's I love how you said the excursion, and then you made a list of the different things you could actually do for the excursion. Because I think there'd be teachers listening to this saying, that's awesome that you're using the excursion to meet other outcomes. But they probably didn't even think that it could help them write the newsletter part for it and the permission note and help with the risk assessment. It can do so many things. And again, you need to go back and check it. But all of those things take time. And if you're saving yourself time there, then you can insert that time somewhere else. And for me, thinking about inserting that time back with the students, your core work, it is so valuable to be able to do that.
Yep, and there are examples already, like Brisbane Catholic Ed did a wonderful pilot of using AI for a variety of admin tasks up there. And they found in their particular research for that project that they were saving teachers on average 9.3 hours a week of admin time. And you just think,
Wow.
okay, even if that's half true for other jurisdictions for whatever reasons or something like that, you're just like, what could you do with an extra 4 to 5 hours a week permanently? Now, there would be some who say, oh, great, now you can do all this other admin in that time too. But no, what I think is that we're going to start over the next 18 to 24 months. We're really going to start people taking that step back, zooming out and saying, okay, how much of that excursion planning has to be done by a human now? Is it that they just have to do the checks as we go, as you would a human admin person or assistant who's been given the task to do that whole workflow? Can we take that whole workflow away? Or which parts do we really want to keep? Maybe, and I'm just thinking of this right now, so thank you for the inspiration, is do we do the kind of startup model for some of these things, which is not appropriate in every case, but you switch it off and see who screams of a
Yeah.
feature. And it's like, okay, let's just switch off that whole workflow around whatever the paperwork trail is and see if anyone even notices, like in a pilot sort of a sense, of course, but then look at the gains as well and say there will always be rich valuable things for teachers to do, and paperwork might be one of them at a certain point in certain ways, right? So let's talk about accessing disability funding, and the documentation required for that is massive, right? Huge. And schools are not built for that, and there's zero funding for schools to be able to actually allocate people to do that. It's usually just lumped on the diverse learning team or somebody like that at a school or a system to actually enact that. So you almost need to double the funding just to be able to get the funding and to manage the funding. But what if AI could come along and do that? I was listening to a podcast on the way home from a school yesterday here in Sydney talking about the aged care system and how everyone gets old. So everyone in Australia will need to access aged care support of some sort. Vast majority of us will need to get an ACAT assessment. Vast majority of us will need support through that process. And not everyone will have what my grandparents had, which was my mum and uncle and aunt who could pop through that process and do the phone calls and do the chasing and do the advocacy and do the emails and do all that stuff. Him at 82, yeah, about that, when he finally left his home and went into aged care, he couldn't have managed that himself. And there are tons of people out there who can't manage it themselves. And my first thought, of course, having just run an AI workshop, was, hang on, if this is all admin and it's rules-based and it's evidence-based and there's really clear rules and pathways and logic to do with that, well, Haley's really good at all that stuff. And of course, you don't want necessarily people to have their private data analyzed by an AI and things like that alone without human intervention. But even if AI could do half of that and get more people who need support, the support they need, whether it's disability funding in schools, whether it's aged care assessments and things like that, shouldn't we at least explore it? I think that's surely a path forward for those sorts of areas.
Yeah. Matt, have you come across any schools that have just been like a big no to AI? I'll give you an example. My mum is a teacher too. A couple of years ago when ChatGPT first came out, they were writing reports. It was about report time. And I was like, I think we put out a podcast or we put out something on Instagram about how you should get ChatGPT to help you, assist you with writing your reports. And she said, oh, my principal's banned it. You're not allowed to. Firstly, I was like, she would never know if you did, unless you get those N dashes or M dashes, the really long dashes. I just learned the other day that's what they were called. But have you come across that?
Yes, and that was the first reaction, right, of all the different systems. Nick and I talked about this in our book as well, is that it was a logical response from systems to manage risk, was to say no. Initially, new technology, we don't know where the data's going. We're pretty sure it's going offshore. We don't know what it's being used for. Don't use it in an official capacity. I can understand that logic. I don't agree with it because I think you have to be nimble and agile, and especially when it is already in students' hands. I think it's, how controversial should I be? I think it's bordering on negligence to just throw your hands up, put a wall up and say that's not our responsibility. Because of course then things do happen, and we can talk about deep fakes and things like that in a minute if you want. But I think that doesn't help the situation. However, most schools and most systems I've seen, even if that was their initial position, have since gone through a process of review and evaluation and getting on board with those areas where they feel comfortable, where they feel they can manage it, where they feel they can reduce the risk to an acceptable point. And at the same time, though, knowing that the students are doing whatever they want with whatever platforms they want. And importantly, their ecosystem of apps probably looks different to what the grown-ups have. So the apps that students are using, probably not the apps you recommend to them. Not only because it's not cool to use what old people use, which is right. Like actually the strategy that should have probably been used is that to tell them, hey, your parents are using all these apps too. Oh, gross. They'll go somewhere else.
Yeah, that should have been a better strategy to begin with. Yeah.
But we are where we are. And so I think that's one of the things that parents could talk to students about, teachers should talk to students about, is actually, what does your app ecosystem look like? Do you know where your data is going? And that's actually not an AI conversation. That's a cybersecurity, that's a digital citizenship and digital well-being conversation. And for many, many different apps. But of course, now what we've seen over the last 18 months is that all those apps that young people use and that we use on a day-to-day basis now have AI capabilities built into them. As one example, if possibly for your high school teacher/parent audience more so than primary, but primary as well, Snapchat has AI built into it. And all the students know that because my AI popped up and it annoys them. And some of them are really annoyed by it. But a lot of them are using it as we would open up chat platforms to do for certain work and things like that. So they're opening up Snapchat, which is their social media network, right, in their hands. And there are two reasons they're using it. One is because it's already built into an app they already use. So why would I go to that boring old person app over there? And I won't mention names because then I'll get hate mail or something from different companies. But, they're all in the same boat anyway. We're all old. There's that factor. But then on the flip side, that's where all their friends are. So they can share stuff really easily. So there, one example was I was at a school in Northern Victoria and I was running a student forum, or really I was just part of a student conversation. It was really lovely and interesting. And one student started talking through how she uses Snapchat to do her maths homework. And this is really early on in my consultancy, right? So I just popped out of schools. And I just said, sorry, could you just explain to me what you did say Snapchat, right? For maths homework. And she was like, yeah. And a couple of them gave me that awful teenage eye roll to just put me in my age bracket. No, they were very lovely. But then we had that conversation. I said, oh, how many of you use Snapchat for that kind of thing? For your homework, like be realistic on a day-to-day basis. All of them. All of them. And there was one boy who had not been engaged really up until that point. He clearly wanted to be outside kicking a footy or something else. But he leant forward at that point when I said, why? And he said, because that's where my friends are. That's why they're using those apps. It's not the capabilities. It's not the safety standards. It's not even the branding. They're really not that loyal to brands like we might be. It's because that's where their friends are. So I guess there is some brand loyalty there. But I think that's the conversation we have to have with young people too, is what are you actually using and why are you using it? Because all our assumptions are based on our assumptions about how these tools are being used and whatever. But I think people would be quite surprised, horrified in some cases, but also really surprised and, really interested in how young people are using these tools. And it ain't just for cheating.
I love that. Surprised and horrified. I think that they are two very good descriptors of AI
I think
in general.
well, aren't they the two like key performance indicators of being a parent as well? Is that
Yeah.
no?
Yes, you're spot on there. I think you could go down that track of the horrified and all of the terrible things and all of the awfulness that comes along with AI, or you could go down the track of being surprised, pleasantly surprised, and all of the amazing things that can come from it too. And we need to know both.
Absolutely.
I agree with that. But at the same time, I feel like I'd rather focus on the positive things than all of the terrible things out there.
Yeah, like you say, I think we have to be, to me, that's what realistic means, right? Is to
Yeah.
be walking forwards and to be exploring this weird, wild forest of craziness that our students are already wandering through, right? So we've got a choice there. Either we walk with them and maybe shine a light towards the dark stuff and say, yeah, don't go down that pathway. But if you do, I'm still here. Come back to me. As well as recognizing all the awful stuff too and saying that it's there, it's horrible, and we're here to make sure you don't harm yourself in those spaces. And that's part of my advice to schools as well, is to be that safe space for students. So I think I said it at EduTech, I usually do, is I try and put it in terms that are less techie. And I say, look, it's like healthy eating education. You have zero control over whether kids walk out of the school gates and go to Macca's or go to the servo and get something awful. And I'm part of that too, right? Like the number of times you just duck to the shops or something like that and the kid goes, oh yeah, can I have a Turkish delight or whatever? It's on special. So you go, yeah, maybe. And we'll just, I don't know, have an apple when we get home to balance that.
Yeah.
Anyway, but what the school can do is be that safe space for students, for parents as well, and for teachers, of course, to have those conversations, to ask difficult questions, sometimes very difficult, sensitive, and troubling questions, because that's the space they should ask. Just like we hopefully create a home environment that does that too, right? Can you control what they eat outside of school? No. Can you tell them not to go party? No. You can provide drugs and alcohol education at school and say, look, here are the stats, the cold, hard stats. Here are some case studies. Here are some stories from young people. Here is why we recommend you do not do these things and you do these other things. This is what healthy practices look like. And guess what? If we don't do any of that, students are still going to wander through that jungle. And then we're going to be like, oh, what do we do when it fails? And it will. There will be times. And this is the thing. Like, I've got two kids, and there will be times when they see something awful online and they're not ready for it, when they experience something awful online. But I hope what we're doing is providing them a space where they know they can come back and ask a question, where they can burst into tears, where they can share their poster that they've just been super excited to create on the Great Barrier Reef and all that sort of stuff, because that's life.
I want to ask you one more question before we wrap up, and it's around the idea of privacy and students using AI and teachers using AI, and where the line is that we have to walk with privacy of what we upload, what we don't upload, what platforms we use that protects privacy.
Sure. Look, I think it's something that each and every school, community, network of schools, association, whatever it happens to be, has to work through, because it's changing so frequently. So at the moment, there are no standards for technology companies, for example. I've been working on a project to support, but there's no standards for, and these aren't educational technologies either, right? They're just technologies.
That's
So
right.
there's no kind of standards we can fall back on. except for things like, the various privacy acts, various international standards around data security and privacy. But I think the conversation is, would you share that with a random person on the street? Because if you wouldn't share it with a random person on the street, don't put it into ChatGPT or any of the other platforms. Because what it does by default is it learns that information. So one of the earliest examples of it going quite wrong in the early days, which was only a couple of years ago, which from a history teacher's point of view was like no time at all. But anyway, a couple of years ago when all this started, and an employee of Samsung uploaded financial data into ChatGPT as it was then and asked it to do some financial analysis and give some insights. And that learnt all that financial data from that company. And then everyone else in the world could access that if they use ChatGPT. So there's been plenty of cases right from the very beginning of people uploading information they shouldn't have. That example of would you share it with the person on the street or would you tell your grandma was one we used to talk about social media a couple of years ago. And if you're not, then don't say it, don't post it, don't put it up into these systems because they are taking that data and learning it and using it as part of the outputs to everybody else in the world. Like I said, there are teachers who say they want to create a seating plan for their classroom, right? You can use ChatGPT or any of the others to do that, to give you some suggestions around that. You don't have to put the students' names in. You just put students 1 through 30 and you can upload it as a table with all this little advice on each person, as do when you're chatting to a colleague. You say, okay, student 1 cannot sit next to student 3. Student 7 needs attention front or to the side or something like that. You can put all that detail in and it will give you sometimes a visual of what that seating plan looks like. So in a nutshell, that's a little example of where you don't need to share any sort of sensitive or private information about that. I think the only time you would share, say, student results, paperwork about students or colleagues or yourself really is when you've got the approval and the green light from somebody in your school leadership, or if in the case of the department, someone in the head office potentially, or head office at a Catholic system or something like that, to say, yep, this platform can be used for sensitive and private data because it's an in-house product. Yep,
Yeah.
it might be Google Gemini, but it's an enterprise model. The data's not going anywhere. Go. You can put anything that you would normally save on a Google Drive or a Microsoft OneDrive or whatever. That information can be used there. It's not going anywhere else. So therefore, it's at the moment like an exception to the rule. The rule is don't do it. Don't upload anything sensitive. Just strip out the information that you're worried about at all and then use it in AI. The exception to the rule is when someone says, yeah, we've purchased or organized for this particular version of this particular platform to allow you to do that. And some of the school information systems, for example, are starting to explore these ways of using the information they've already got and applying AI in-house inside that platform. Those are the sorts of exceptions that I currently see, and they'll grow. But again, would you tell someone on the street? Then don't share it with a platform.
Okay, so what I'm hearing here is that there are options, but you need to check for it to be more contained. So if you've got a more contained use of AI, which you need to check for, then you're okay there. But other than that, be discreet. Be discreet with students' names and information. So if we were writing, say, an IEP, for example, instead of using Matt, I could just use student A has this. We need to cater for A, B, C. Can you come up with some strategies?
Yep, absolutely. And you can even upload documents that have certain information retracted. That would be, depending on the document, whether you have the right to do it and all that sort of stuff. But say you've got a previous version of an IEP and you strip out the name of that student and you say, now, this is the student I need an IEP for is similar to this, but they have this condition or they have this need. Can you redo it for that? I don't see any issue with that, so long as you've got that permission to use the original document, that sort of thing. But yeah, I'd suggest going anonymous as often as possible. Even with your school as well, you're not putting in information about your school or where you live or anything like that. Just like we tell students, please don't publish that kind of information online, which is harder and harder to do through social media. But try, that's part of being a digital citizen and supporting your digital well-being is trying to do that, trying to manage it in some way. Yeah, I think strategies that schools certainly can use, but the really important thing, I'm glad I thought of this before we stop talking, is whatever the circumstance, whatever the idea, the strategy, the scenario that people are using AI in, make sure as a school, as a community, including parents, including students, that everybody is clear and aligned on what the expectations are. Because it doesn't matter whether you say we're highly restricted on the use of AI, it's a free-for-all, or somewhere in between. If you are clear and aligned on what that looks like, so that literally Matt Esterman, could walk into that school and rock up to a kid playing handball in the playground and go, hey, what's your school's perspective on AI? And then I go into the staff room and say, hey, what's your school's perspective on AI while someone's getting a cup of tea? And do the same thing to a parent as well at the school gate at the end of the day. If they all say a similar thing, you're winning. If they're saying something totally different or I don't know, you've really got some work to do.
That's a big project, really, isn't it?
It is, but guess what? We've got AI to help us with certain parts of
We
that
do.
as well.
We
So
do.
it really is and that's what I work with schools all the time on, is whether it's a one-off thing around AI and assessment or whether it's a longer term project. It's like, actually, this can be one of those areas that is a prototype for how you might do policy development and management into the future. Is, okay, do we need to have 14 committee meetings about this thing? Or can we have 5 committee meetings with an AI recording those meetings and giving us the notes and doing the summaries and generating some of the documents in between, so that it's like having that genuine digital assistant doing some of that legwork, so that our role becomes deliberation, thinking deeply, applying it to school values. That's the work of that committee, not, oh, the director of teaching and learning has to type up another 5-page policy document.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Matt, so we end our podcast in a new way. We've started it this year, where a previous guest leaves a question for a new guest. So we've got a question for you, but I'm looking at the question and I'm like, it could not have been more perfect for you. Okay, so we'll get your question off air, but the question
Sure.
for you to answer is, what is one prediction you're willing to make about the future that others might disagree with?
Okay, here's a prediction for you. Every student who's currently in school will at some point in their career work for an AI entity.
Ooh, wow.
How's that?
I love it. I love it because it tied in with the topic. I don't know. I'm sure there's so many people out there that would disagree with it, but others are probably nodding in agreements. Thank you so much. You have shared so much today, so much to think about. Can you let our listeners know where they can find you if they want to connect or talk about AI and all of the wonderful work you're doing?
Oh, sure. If they're not sick of me already, they can hop on my website, www.nextwordnow.com, and they can, for better or worse, they can Google me and probably connect on LinkedIn is the best place at the moment. That's where I find the most valuable conversations are happening in this space. And I do share a lot that way. So yeah, I would love to connect with people. And thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
At the end of the day, AI is here and AI is here to stay. Whether you are a lover of AI, you're really not sure yet, or you don't like it, AI is here to stay. And I hope that this episode gave you some food for thought. As I said at the very beginning of the episode, I saw Matt talk at EduTech this year, and it really did give me food for thought. It made me reflect on different things that I had not thought of before. And I think this is the thing with AI, is that there's going to be lots of things that are popping up constantly. It's not going to be one thing that turns us around and all of a sudden we're comfortable with it, because as all technology, it's going to be changing. And it's that changing landscape that I guess kind of feels a little bit scary. My advice to you would be open-minded where you can be. If you're comfortable, use AI to help you and help your students. And if we're using it in a positive way, then we are absolutely on the right track. Thank you so much to Matt for joining me today. We can't wait to be back in your ears next week with another awesome episode. We will see you then. But before we go, you know the drill. There are rainbows ahead, my friend, and together we're unstoppable.